Are you an artist who's always wanted to join a game jam? Maybe you just don't know how, or maybe you don't know what to expect. In this video, let's talk about game jamming as an artist. So here are 5 tips to game jamming as an artist. And if you stick around till the end, I'll throw in an extra tip. Tip number 1 is to be clear. And what I mean by that is be clear about your skills, be clear about what you're going to do on the team. You do want to stretch yourself, but you don't want to commit to a lot of things you can't do. For instance, as an artist, you're going to be expected to animate. You're going to be expected to do UI designs, do UI art, do the game art, the actual assets in the game, do the tile mapping system. If it has tile maps, you're doing a 2D game. You're going to be expected to do all these things. So if you cannot do all those things, you need to be upfront about it. Talk about what the game jam requires. A lot of times there will be a prompt and you can sort of get ideas. Like sometimes the prompt you'll be like, we're going to do a 2D game for sure, but we're not for certain if it's going to be like isometric or 2.5D, something like that. You can kind of talk about some things beforehand before the game jam even starts. And that's one thing I would be clear about. I've been in several game jams, and if you're an artist, you are expected to do all the art stuff if you're the only artist. Same for being a programmer or a music person. So it's not really different, but sometimes when you voice what you cannot do, then that will change what you're going to do for the game. Like it'll be like, okay, if we can't do a lot of animation, can't do an animation heavy game. That segues into the next tip: keep it simple. And what I mean by that is when you're ideating at the very beginning, let's say it's a 3-day game jam, it starts on a Friday, you're not really going to get a lot done in terms of final asset creation until about Saturday, midday, because Friday and Saturday morning, you're probably going to be spending all that time still trying to come up with a concept, an idea, just nail down the direction. So my biggest tip, what I wish I would have known sooner, was just to keep it simple in terms of when you're coming up with concepts or ideas. People are going to be like, oh, we could do something like this. We can do something like that. And a lot of times they'll want you to create like concepts for it. So I would suggest sketching things out quickly, finding images online to try to get consensus on a direction, or even using AI art, because although there's a stigma around AI art, it's very useful for those beginning stages where you don't know what you want to do and you just need a lot of different ideas to pretty much sift through what you want to do. So that's really helpful. So just keep it simple. Rough sketches. The main, I would say at the very beginning, your main goal as an artist is just to get everyone on the same page in terms of a consensus, in terms of the visual feel of the game, what it's going to look like. That's the main concern until you get like a lockdown story and things of that nature. Next tip, tip 3 is schedule time for exploration. So at the start of the game jam, it's going to be, let's say Friday, Saturday morning, it's going to be really hectic. You'll probably be in a Zoom chat or a Discord chat together non-stop for 2 to 3 hours and trying to come up with ideas, racking your brain on everything. And it might seem like that's how it's going to be the whole time, but midday, Saturday and Sunday, I say Sunday morning, you're usually like solo, and also at night if you choose to work past like stay up late or something like that on the game jam. Some people will stay up the entire time. I don't do that. I will sleep about 5-6 hours, but that's normal for me. So there will be times when you're solo until there's scheduled checkpoints, and during those times you can take some time to explore, because when you're in the meetings, I usually try to reserve that time to get everyone on the same page and make sure we're all thinking the same thing visually as an artist. So when you're solo, that's when you really do your exploration, and you're pretty much coming up with things to pitch for your next meeting. Think about it like that. And you also want to reinforce the habits that you actually want to use when you're working. If you've ever met someone who rushes a lot, it's not that they have a lot to do, they just rush a lot all the time. So even if you have a lot to do, you need to practice the same creative process that you want to use if you have a lot of time. That way, it's not like when you don't have a lot of time, you shortcut the process. Even when you don't have a lot of time, you got to use the same process, just shorter intervals for each step. Tip number 4, always go forward. I wanted to say always be moving forward, but I didn't have enough space on the card. Always go forward. So on that note, if someone has not scheduled checkpoints, if you don't have a producer on your team, and a producer or project manager is a person just manages the project, they'll come up with different checkpoints. They'll help align the different areas like the game design and programming. If you don't have someone like that, make sure there are checkpoints scheduled throughout the, let's say it's a 3-day game jam. You want to check in at least once a day after the initial meeting, just to ensure everyone's on the same page. And then there should also be a meeting maybe 3 to 5 hours before the game jam is over, because that's usually when everyone starts to throw everything together. You start to get to run into a lot of issues, and you all kind of need to be present so you can kind of troubleshoot those issues quickly. So I would say there's always like a all hands meeting at the very beginning, and that's just where everyone's in the meeting. And then near the very end, you want to have one of those as well, when everyone's putting all their assets together, putting the code together, all that stuff, just so it'll go smoothly. Now it is going to be rough. It's going to seem like it's going to seem hectic and rough and crazy, and it's going to seem like it might seem like nobody knows what they're doing, but rest assured that's normal. Tip number 5, and actually this tip probably should have been earlier, but tip number 5 is choose your game view first. Choose your game view first, and this is one of the most important decisions you can make, because the game view determines the type of art you will make. If you're making an isometric 2D game, you can't really use 3D. Well, you can use 3D art. If you're making an isometric 2D game, or you're making a 2D game or a 2.5D game, you need to know that at the very beginning. Even if you're not sure what type of game, when you're working with a game designer, they're going to be the person that's really driving the type of experience. You need to talk to them and try to get them to lock down some options, because you want a concept in the view that the game will be in. And what I mean by that is, when you're drawing sketches and coming up with ideas, draw it in the view the game will be in, because it's a lot easier to use that work. Let's say you concept something, you bring it to a nice color, rough version, and you're like, wow, this looks good. I can actually just use this as an asset. You can just pop it in the game. Whereas if you concept in a 2D flat side view, but your game is like isometric, you could potentially use that, but it might cause some trouble that you have to translate it to the view the game is in. So I just like to concept in the game view. And the final tip is tip 6, main menu art. Don't forget about the main menu art, or menu art in general. As the artist, you're going to be the person that is in charge of, even if you don't do everything, you need to just make sure that you're the person that knows everything that needs to be done. For instance, the main menu is something that always gets overlooked. I worked in several game jams where we didn't think about a main menu until the last day, and then we ended up having to just grab some image or some screenshot from the game. When you have time to think about the main menu from the start, it's kind of cool, because you can think about, how can I create art that can also be used for a main menu, that can also be used for concept art, that can also be used for in-game assets. Almost trying to like a little meta game. How many assets can I get out of one piece of art? Well, that's the game I like to play. So you want to plan for these things: menu art, icons, buttons. These elements always get overlooked until the end of the game. If you can start thinking about these at the beginning, by the time you get to the end, you'll have a much better experience. And yeah, the further you can plan ahead, the smoother the experience will be. So this is just one big tip: the main menu art. It might seem like it's a no-brainer, but I myself have forgotten it several times, and it's only recently when I started thinking about it at the beginning. Like, I would kind of take account of all the things I know we will need, even if I'm not going to do them from the art perspective. Just think about it as if you're the art director. Even though you're doing all the things, kind of put together an asset list of what you're going to need. Even if you don't do everything, you can outsource assets, like taking from the asset store, depending on the game jam's rules. But that's just something I like to think about. And I will say, all the game jams I've done that I've thought about the cover art earlier in the process, I feel like they were much better for me, just because I don't like surprises. So if I can know as much as possible at the start, then the game jam is usually really good for me. Even though it's always going to be hectic, you may or may not be tired, but that's normal. You might get mad at each other, yell a couple times. That's normal too. Don't worry about that. don't take it personally, because everyone's kind of under a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, and they kind of feel like nobody wants to underperform, so everyone's trying to do their best. But there's not really a lot of information because there's not time for the actual process. Because instead of having time to do concept art and like do story work, and then like, hey, get concepts for the story, and then come up with different frameworks for the coding, what do you think will be best for this view? Everything's not plotted out like it would normally be, so you're pretty much doing everything all at once at the same time, and it's going to be hectic, but it's a great learning experience. So those are the 5+1 tips for game jamming as an artist. Hope you like it. Let me know if you want to hear more kind of talking head videos like this in the future. Thanks.